Okay, so second, all right. So Yachimo, greetings, Asaase everyone for joining in with this new course, NKANESEM. For those who are unaware, I'm Odwirafo Kwesi Ran Bata Akan Odwirafo of Akwamuman Amaruka TV, the Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. So this is one of our many online courses. We wanted to address this subject because, of course, misinformation abounds with regard to this subject. And of course, people put forward misinformation, especially trying to tie misinformation to the culture of ancient Khanit and Kemet, or Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Black culture in general. And what people are doing in our community, first and foremost, of course, we don't follow the misinformation and pseudo-cosmology and pseudo-esotericism and pseudo-occultism of the whites and their offspring, because of course it's inaccurate. But then some of our people will take that misinformation and try to blacken that misinformation up and put it forward as accurate and valuable. And what they're doing is misinforming people, and people are going off track. So, and when they make mistakes based on the misinformation, then they manufacture foolish rationalizations about why this particular, philosophy didn't seem to work in this area, or maybe they were just making a mistake and doing it wrong and so forth. Misinformation. So we want to come forward with the accurate information. So we use the terminology NKANESEM, Khan, in the language of the Akan people of Ghana and Ivory Coast. Millions of Akan people in Ghana and Ivory Coast, about 24, 25, 26 million people between Ghana and Ivory Coast, one of the largest Afuraitkaitnit groups on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit, Africa, and one of the largest groups from whom many of our people were taken and forced into the Western Hemisphere. So many of us are Akan people in the Northern Hemisphere in the United States, Akan people who were forced into North America, continued Akan ancestral religion under the title Hoodoo, which is the Akan term Undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, and plant life. And Undu also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession and spirit communication. Undu also means to feel a presentiment or foreboding, to see what is unfolding in the spirit realm, to make proper decisions. So that's why we utilize the term Hoodoo in North America, because it is the Akan term. Undu, it is Akan ancestral religion. But we also show in our publications, we published 31 books to date, that the Akan tradition, just like various other traditions on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit, come directly from our ancestral language and culture of ancient Khanit, Nubia, and Kemet. So first, we show this. Let's go to our page. This is the flyer, of course. This is the page on our website that addresses this information. Let's go out and go in real quick. All right. This is our Akradinbosom page, and we're going to focus a lot of the information here. So, in the Akan language, the term for deities, divine spirit forces in creation, the spirits that animate the solar, lunar, planetary bodies, the black substance of space, oceans, rivers, mountains, fire, earth, air, water, and so forth. The Akan term, the popular Akan term for that is Abosom, which means the deities, the divine spirit forces in creation, goddesses and gods. Just as the term in the Yoruba language for the divine spirit forces that animate creation is Orisha. In the Ewe language, it is the Vodou. In Igbo, it's the Arusi. In ancient Kemet, it's the Ntoru and Ntorotu, misnomered Neteru and Netertu, but it's really Ntoru and Ntorotu and so forth, the deities, the divine spirit forces in creation. So that's the term Abosom in Akan. And that term is derived from a term from ancient Kemet, as a matter of fact. So on this particular page, we talk about a specific grouping of Abosom forces in nature that animate the male and female deities, divinities, goddesses and gods that animate, the spirits that animate these solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the Akan 7-day week. And they're called the Akradinbosom. So we wrote a couple of books as part of this series, Akradinbosom 1 and 2. And let's go into a couple of them just so we can show, because the key with regard to this, especially tonight and as we lay this foundation and go forward throughout the 6-week course, these are the male and female divinities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week. These solar, lunar, and planetary bodies affect and govern all natural cycles on Earth, but they also govern the 11 major body systems. As we can see here, these are the same divinities from ancient Kamit and Khanit with the same names and descriptive titles in the Akan language and culture today that they have in ancient Kamit. And we prove that in our publications. We're the same people who migrated from East Afuraitkaitnit from Sudan and Kamit and so forth, Nubia and Kamit, into the western part of the continent a couple of thousand years ago. Then about 1,000 years later, some of our people migrated from the regions of the Mali and Ghana Empire and so forth, further south into the forest belt where Ghana and Ivory Coast are now. And we continue to perpetuate Akan civilization in the forest belt and savanna regions. Then hundreds of years after that, some of those people were snatched from that region and forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Kesi, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. And this is how Akan people ended up in United States, as well as the Caribbean and South America and so forth, and Europe as well. So we continue to practice the same ancestral religion we brought from ancient Khanit, Nubia, and Kamit, Egypt, into the western part of the continent and into the Western Hemisphere. So we still worship these same divinities. We still communicate with them. They still possess us through spirit possession, spirit communication, adibisa, divination, and so forth. What's important about these divinities that govern the 7-day week and all natural cycles on Earth and the 11 major body systems, their birth order names are the numbers of the Akan counting system. So Ekon means 1, Enum means 2, Esa means 3, Enan means 4, Enum means 5, Nsia means 6, Nson means 7, Awotwe means 8, Nkron means 9, Edu means 10, and Duko means 11. So the birth order names or birthplace names, the manifestation names of these divinities are the numbers 1 through 11. So the numbers are associated with deities. When we talk about quote unquote numerology, in the real sense, and numerology is just a term that Europeans made up about 100 years ago, but in the true sense, the essence of quote unquote numbers is only important when it's associated with the deities, with Abosom, with Orisha, with Vodou, with the goddesses and gods and their birthplace or manifestation place names, their birth order names or manifestation place names. If the numbers you're talking about cannot be tied to a force in nature that you can communicate directly with, that incarnated into the world with you when you were born into the world, that spirit came with you and was assigned to you, and you brought that energy into your clan and so forth. If you can associate the number with the deity, then your practice of quote unquote numerology is nonsensical and foolish and fraudulent. And this is what is being promoted to our people because they don't understand the reality that quote unquote numerology or sacred numbers, they're only sacred in the context that they're associated with the functioning, the expansion and contraction of the energy of specific deities in creation. So we're going to get into that. So, but first, let's look at a portion of one of the books, because we need some true historical background. We're going to get to that. And of course, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat room. So we have our 2 books, and we have articles, books, and as well as articles on each one of these 11 male and female deities, which we're going to get into throughout throughout this course. But first, just want to go to volume 1 real quick. And these are our 31 books that you see on the screen here. This is volume 1 of the Akradinbosom. We talk about cosmology, incarnation, reincarnation, and so forth. We talk about the nature of the Ka, the soul, the divine consciousness, called Ka for males, Ka'et for females in the language of Kamit. In Akan, that's Okra, and Okra, this term for the male term for soul and the female term for soul. In Yoruba, that's the Ori Inu. In Vodun, it's the Selido, and the Igbo is the Chi. It's the deity, the male divinity if you're male, the female divinity if you're female, that's assigned to you, that comes into the world with you, assigned to you by the Supreme Being, pre-incarnation. When you're an ancestor, an ancestress, and you're about to be drawn into the womb of the woman that's going to be your mother, before you as an ancestral spirit are drawn into that womb and to begin to gestate and be born as a baby, 40 weeks later, before that happens, you as an ancient ancestor or ancestress are drawn up to the great mother and great father Supreme Being, who is called Amen and Aminet. In ancient Kemet, this is the deity Amen. This is the great mother Aminet. Together they comprise the Supreme Being, the great father, the great mother, who comprise the Supreme Being. In Akan, that's Nyame for the male, Nyamewa for the great mother. In Yoruba, that's Olorun, the great male, and the great mother is actually Olokun. That is Lisa in Vodun and Mawu, the great father and great mother and so forth. So all traditional cultures and such religious practices in our culture, as Afurakani people, understand the divine balance of the Afuraitkaitnit male and female that derives from the great mother and great father Supreme Being, functioning together as a unit. There's no monotheism, that's pure stupidity. There's a great mother, great father who give birth to multiple male and female divinities. We're drawn to them. We're assigned a specific divinity that installs itself in the head region, and then we are sent into the womb. And that deity is what determines our function in creation, the nature of our personality, and so forth. It's not a life path number. That doesn't determine your function and your soul and the nature of your character and attributes and so forth. The only thing a number can tell you, if it's properly understood, is the association of a specific deity that governs you, a deity that you communicate with, a deity that will show and communicate himself or herself to you, whose energy you bring into your physical body as a shrine for that divinity, not just a number with some attributes. That's nonsense. So, in the first part of the book, we talk about how the spirit of an individual pre-incarnation, that image symbolizing the spirit, once Nyame assigns a specific divinity to the head region of the spirit. Now the spirit body has a soul, a divine consciousness, a divinity installed in the head region, just like your physical body has a smaller body in the head region, that's the brain, and it regulates all functions in the body. Your spirit body, as an ancestor and ancestress, there's a radiant force in the head region. That's your spirit's brain, that is the soul. The soul is actually the divine consciousness. It's a deity. In European culture, the soul, they will try to say the soul means breath or spirit means breath. That's nonsense. In reality, the term soul comes from our language. So when you understand real etymology, not the nonsense that you hear from Moors and other misguided people in our community, Black people in our community, when you understand what the soul is, it's a divinity, a male divinity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female, installed in the head region of the spirit body. It's the spirit's brain. If it's a fire divinity, then you'll have a fiery, disposition. If it's a cool water spirit or river divinity and so forth, you'll have that watery kind of cool energy. But rivers can also overflow and flood out a community and so forth. That's the protective, defensive aspect of it as well. Depending on what kind of energetic force you have, that divinity brings that into your physical vessel and spirit vessel. Now, we talk about that in the beginning, and we're going to get into some more of that. I just want to go into this nature of Kan for a second, just so we can understand. We're talking here about the Akan people, Khanit, Kanu, Kangi, and so forth. If you're asking an Akan person why they call themselves Akan, the term Kan, people in Ghana and Ivory Coast, Kan means first, foremost, from the beginning. Kan also means to count, to calculate, or reckon. And Kan also means shining, luminous, and so forth. So in the Akan dictionary, you will see Akan, first, foremost, form a place or rank of time, and so forth. Formerly, previously. Kan, to count, number, reckon. Kan, clear, bright, but also light, luminous, shining, and so forth. First or foremost, from the beginning, a component of the first people to exist on Earth. Kan, to count, calculate, or reckon, the first to measure, establish measurements, study, divide, measure, understand patterns in creation, and so forth, and replicate those patterns as establishing a society, villages, farming, all kinds of things. Kan, light, luminous, the first to receive the divine living energy of the creator and creatress through spirit possession and spirit communication, and the divine living energy of fire of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress. Once possessing our people, we became illuminated, empowered, vitalized, just like when spirit possession happens in ritual practice and so forth. When the drums begin to play and the ritual dances happen and so forth, spirit possession takes place. The spirit forces come down and possess the body of the person, healing, medicine, procuring medicine from plant life and mineral life and so forth, guidance, divination, all kinds of things happen. Divine wisdom manifests through the divinity operating through the body. That's an illumination, a lighting upon the person, bringing illumination to the individual and the clan. So these are what the terms Kan mean in the Akan language. That's why we call ourselves Akan. But that's derived from the language of ancient Kemet. This is not Kent. It's actually pronounced Kant in the language of ancient Kemet, formerly, previously, in the front, the forepart at the beginning. The land south of Egypt, of course, which is Nubia. Kantiu, dwellers in the south, the Nubians. Kan, the front land, the south. Kanti, the Nubian frontier land in Sudan. And then you see Kantiu, which is plural, dwellers in the south, the Nubians, people of the Tanit Nome, and so forth. Then we also have the term Kan in the Akan language, to count, number, reckon. This symbol of the tethered rope in the language of Kemet, as you can see here in the Coptic dialect, this symbol is the K sound. So that's not Thennu or Chennu. In the Coptic dialect, it's Kanu. And what does it mean to count, to reckon? Just like in the Akan language, the Twi language of the Akan people, Kan means to count or reckon. In the language of ancient Kemet, the tethered rope and the little vessel, the new vessel, is the Ka and Nu, Kanu, Kanu, to count, to reckon. Same word, same meaning. And we show in Coptic, this symbol is the Ka sound. We see the tethered rope once again. So it's not Thennu, it's Kanu. That's the term for the Libyans, the people living west of Kemet, the Western Nubians, in the deserts west of Kemet. You have the Western Nubians of the Kanu, and south of Kemet, you have the Southern Nubians, as we just saw, the Kantiu, and so forth. But that term Kanu, meaning the Libyans, the people west of Kemet, is the same term Kahan, to sparkle, scintillate, glitter, or shine, any bright or sparkling substance. And once again, that's Kan, light, luminous, and so forth. So we show that Kan means to count, to reckon. Kan means first, foremost. Kan, people of the south, and so forth. So the same three meanings in the Akan language today, how we define ourselves, are the exact same three meanings that you find in the language of ancient Khanit and Kemet. The people of the Kan land, the southern land, the land of the south, the Kanu or Kantiu, the Kan people, first people, foremost people, the first to be illuminated, shining, glittering, scintillating, and so forth. the first people to count, calculate, or reckon, engage in mathematical equations, and replicate patterns in nature to establish civilization. The same Kan people migrated from the Kan land, Nubia, to the western part of the continent, reestablished the Kan Empire, which is Kana, or the Empire of Ghana. We were forced from that region because of Muslim invasions, and some people migrated south and reestablished the Kan Empire in the forest, where Ghana and Ivory Coast are now. And then hundreds of years later, some of those Kan people were forced into the Western Hemisphere, and they ended up in North America practicing the Hoodoo tradition, in Jamaica practicing the Nubia tradition, in South America and Suriname practicing the Winti tradition and so forth. These are Akan people migrating from the east to the west, all the way to the Western Hemisphere. We show some information regarding DNA, and then we also show that ancient Sumer was called the Kangi land and so forth. And we show some etymology with regard to that to prove that. And then we show that the people of ancient Sumer, with the ancient Kang land or Kangi land and so forth, the same culture, continuity of culture from ancient Sumer. You see this fertility divinity, ancient Sumer, Ubaidian period, pre-dynastic Sumer, 7,000 years ago. Then you see figure B, mother goddess Inanna, the Akkadian Empire, and then the Akan representation of the same divinity to taste, so-called fertility dolls, Akuba doll, and so forth, representative in ancient Khanit and Kemet as the Ankh and so forth. We just showed the continuity of culture, but the Kang land, ancient Sumer, the Kang people who migrated from Kemet into Kanana, so-called Canaan, and further northeast into so-called Sumer, which is the Kang land. So you have Kangi, Sumer, Kanana, later called Canaan, so-called Israel and so forth, Kan, Nubia, ancient Kemet, the Kan Empire. Kan people have been migrating and reestablishing and carrying civilization wherever we went. The reason why that's important is because the 7-day week that they associated with ancient Sumer or Akkad or Babylon is the ancient Kangi or Kan 7-day week. And these same deities from ancient Sumer, you'll find their same descriptive titles in the Akan language today. The reason why Akan people in West Afuraitkaitnit have a 7-day week, whereas Yoruba have a 5-day week, and the Igbo have a 4-day week, and the Guan people have a 6-day week and so forth, and the people surrounding the Akan people have different weeks, but the Akan people have a 7-day week, is because the Akan people established ancient Kangi or Sumer, so-called the Akkadian Empire, and we have the same deities by the same names, with the same descriptive titles. And in the latter part of the book, we show that each one of the names in ancient Sumer, like Utu for the sun, and Nana and Swin for the moon, and Nergal Gibil for the Mars, and Enki or Nabu for Mercury, Supai and Sagmegar for Jupiter, and Inanna for Venus, and Ninurta as well as Kajamanu for Saturn and so forth. We show that the exact same names you find in the Akan language today, as well as descriptive titles in the Medutu, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet. So we have to show that continuity of culture. So that's what we're showing in the book. Now that's important because, as we said, these deities, we have the Akan names, Awusi, Ajwa, Abena, Bena, Akua, Awuku, Yao, Ya, Abba, Afi, and Amimen. Their names in Kemet, Alsar, Alset, Sekmet, Heru, Bedeti, Nebethet, Set, Heru, Nekabed, Wachet, Het, Heru, Amenmen. And when you look in the Akan language, those very same titles exist in the Akan language for the same deities. So for example, Abena in Akan, when a female is born on a Tuesday and she's called Abena, she's named after the divinity Abena, who is Sekhmet. She's called Sekhmet or Sechimet in ancient Kemet. That name is spelled Sechima in Akan, and Sechima is her title in Akan, as well as Abena. So every one of the titles you see in ancient Kemet and the language of Kemet, when we look in the Akan language, and we prove that in all of our books and articles, we have the exact same titles from ancient Kemet in the Akan language today. So you go into the forest in Ghana and you visit Ghana and speak the tree language, they're speaking the Akradinbosom or Akradin, the soul names, but they also utilize these names from ancient Kemet, and they speak those names with the proper vocalizations. So we never stop practicing the culture. It's important because these 11 deities, once again, their birth order names are numbers. So each deity is associated with a number. This is real numerology. Now, let's get to something, break up some myths right quick. When you look at a typical site, for example, numerology.com, and you're going to read about these different things, and some people, take these things and flip them around and try to blacken them up and so forth. In numerology, there are a myriad of numbers that have a significant impact on your life, but the most important and influential number in your personal numerology is your life path number. We can start with that. And as the weeks go by, we're going to get into these other, aspects of numerology, but we're going to lay the foundation cosmologically and linguistically and culturally tonight. So we'll talk about the life path number, for example. They'll say the life path number, people know about that. Whether you're brand new to numerology or looking to expand your understanding of your numerology chart, one of the best places to start is by revealing your life path number and its powerful role in your life. What is my life path number? Your life path number represents who you are at your core, the person you are spending this lifetime learning to become. It is derived from the numbers of your birth date and influences you your entire life. Now, of course, a number doesn't do that. Every Afuraitkaitnit person, African Black person, as an ancestor, before you got into your mother's womb, you were an ancestor or ancestress living in the ancestral realm. You've lived on earth before, a couple of 100 years ago, you transitioned, your spirit left the body, body's buried, you go to the ancestral realm. You're living amongst your former ancestresses and ancestors in a community. Just like if you have a dream and you have a dream about being in a family reunion and so forth, you're interacting with other individuals, you're living in the spirit realm amongst the ancestral community. When it's time for one of your great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughters to get married and she copulates and with a husband to draw your spirit into the womb, once again, you're drawn to Inyamewa Inyame, and they assign a specific deity with specific energy complexes to bring into the world, and you bring that energy into the world with you. If you're the child of a deity of fire, then you're gonna bring that fiery energy with you, and that deity is installed in your head region, guiding you throughout the course of your life. You communicate with him if you're male, or her if you're female. That divinity guides you throughout the course of your life. You bring that fiery energy into the clan and bring that kind of activity into the clan. If it's a watery divinity, same thing. Now, your life path or your life focus is based on the divinity that you communicate with, whose energy you carry into the world. The whites and their offspring cannot communicate with any deity. They have never been able to, they never will be able to. When we look at the cosmology of creation, and we mentioned this in our book, so let's just flip back to that real quick. In the cosmological structure of creation, and we show this in a short, simple little chart. the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, we are a microcosm of that macrocosm. So we showed Amen and Amenet, or Inyame and Inyamewa, the Great Mother and Great Father, Supreme Being, Amen and Amenet, and Akan, that's Inyame and Inyamewa. An Afurakani man is an emanation of Amen, and Afuraitkaitnit woman, African Black woman, is an emanation of Amenet. So Inyamewa and Inyame are the great divine body. All the planets, suns, moons, stars, and so forth, all exist within the body of the great Supreme Being. The black substance of space is the melanin content, the black melanin chemical within the great divine body, and all the planets, suns, moons, stars, and everything else float within that black substance. Just like your body, you're a great being, and there are a number of smaller bodies that dwell within you. You have a black chemical, not just on your skin, but inside your body, the internal stores of melanin. Hold on 1 second. All right. And you have internal stores of melanin. You have internal stores of melanin, and your organs, glands, systems all dwell within that black substance within you. Your organs, glands, and systems are smaller bodies within your great body. And then those organs give birth to cells, as we can see here. And then you have the fluid system, the interstitial fluid, intercellular fluid that permeates the body. In creation, the great divine body is Inyame wa Inyame. The deities are the organs that regulate order in the great divine body. And then the cells, the children of those organs, are plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life. The black substance of space, planets, suns, moons, stars, and so forth. These are organs within the great divine body. And then those give birth to cells, plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life, and so forth. We are cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being. If you're a child, if you're a cell within the liver organ or liver divinity, you support the liver deity, your parent deity, and then you're serving the great body at the same time. Just like your liver cell, when it serves its parent deity, its parent Orisha, its parent Abosom, its parent Vodou, the liver, and it supports liver functions, then it's serving you, the Supreme Being, at the same time. When your pancreas cells serve the pancreas deity, its parent deity, and lives in harmony with that divinity that it functions as a part of, then it's serving you, the Supreme Being, at the same time. When we as cells, Afurakani men, Afuraitkaitnit women, African Black men, African Black women, we're cells when we serve our parent divinity, the divinity that governs our head, then we're also serving the great Supreme Being, Inyamewa and Inyame, or Amenet, Amen, the Great Mother and Great Father at the same time. We're aligning ourselves as cell within the great divine body. And then you have the water system that permeates the entire body, that is akin to the ancestral realm within your physical body, but in the body of creation, that interstitial fluid or intercellular fluid, that is the ancestral realm. Cells die, they become part of the water system, the fluid system, they reconstitute themselves and are reborn as cells once again and so forth. That's the same thing as the ancestral realm. Now, that's the organization of creation. The cells serve the organs and the organs serve the great divinity. And when they live in harmony with order, everything works fine. If you get out of harmony with order, the disease manifests, and we engage the ritual process to get ourselves back in alignment with the great divine body. That's what ancestral religion is about. That's what ritual practice is about, how to realign yourself with the divinity that governs you, your very existence in the world. Once you realign ritually with that force in nature, then you get back on track. So then you have some cells in your body that become cancerous. They become disfigured. They don't look like the other cells. They don't function as the other cells. They malfunction, and they seek to consume and destroy all of the other cells in their path. They become cancerous, and the immune and lymphatic systems isolate those cells, kill them, and expel them from the body. The cancerous cells within the body of Black humanity are the whites and their offspring. White Europeans, white Americans, white Hindus, white Arabs, white Asians, white Hispanics, white pseudo-Native Americans, non-Black individuals, all of whom have only been here for a few thousand years. We've been here for millions of years. They showed up a few thousand years ago as cancerous cells spilling out of northern Eurasia at the end of the last ice age after they were isolated. And as cancerous cells, they have moved throughout Southern Europe, Northern Afuraitkaitnit, Northern Africa, the Near East, the East, North Central South America, and so forth, and have sought to consume and destroy every group of us that they've come in contact with as the cancerous cells that they are. Just like the cancerous cells that can manifest in your body are out of harmony with all the other cells and you as a whole, and this is why your immune and lymphatic system isolates them and kills them. They don't live in harmony with the other cells and organs. They seek to consume and destroy, so they're eradicated. The whites and their offspring are literally the cancerous cells, the disfigured cells that have manifested over the past few years on Earth within the body of Black humanity. This is why the deities, they cannot communicate with them. They cannot be possessed by the deities. They can't communicate with Amen and Amenet, the Great Mother and Great Father, Supreme Being, just like the cancerous cells in your body are not in harmony with any other cells or organs. They are disfigured and dysfunctional. This is why when the whites and offspring invaded Kamit, sought to corrupt religion, manufacture false divinities like Allah and Yahweh and Buddha and Brahman and Jesus and Yeshua and so forth, all these fictional cartoon characters, they sought to corrupt religion, to flip them into fictional white characters who never existed, to get us to worship them, as opposed to aligning ourselves with Amen and Amenet, the Great Mother and Great Father, Supreme Being. So that's the structure of creation. Now let's get back to this whole notion of a life path number. Now, when you know the structure of creation is for us and Black people only, the only natural, healthy cells as humans in the great divine body, and we align with the organs, the deities that we incarnated into the world with, that's what determines our life path. What is our function within an organ? Are we a liver cell? Are we an immune system cell? Are we a skeletal system cell? Are we engineers? Natural inclination towards engineering because it's a structural, function. A member of the skeletal system of creation? Are you a member of the immune system of creation and you have that natural inclination to restore order and eradicate disorder within the population? Are you a part of the renal system, which is the fluid balancing system in the body, in the great divine body of creation, and your natural healeress and so forth? We're talking about what is your function based on the divinity that governs you. Now they talk about life path numbers. What is a life path number? They'll say the life path number determines, represents who you are at your core. That's nonsense. The person you are spending this lifetime learning to become. It is derived from the numbers of your birth date and influences you your entire life. Our life path is determined by the deity that came into the world with us, that we communicate with, that possesses us and shows up in our community. Totally different than what they're talking about. And that deity's birth order gives rise to a specific number that has to do with the deity though, and it's tied to a deity. Now, how do you find the life path number? Let's look at it. The month, the day, and the year. Your life path number is essentially a sum of these numbers. So they talk about adding up the numbers. So how do you find your life path number? Say your birthday is October 22nd, 1980, 10/22/1980. So first you reduce the month, the number 10, you add 1 plus 0, the result is 1. So that's the first thing, you have the number 1. Reduce the date, 22, so October 22nd. Normally you would add 2 and 2 together and that will make 4 to reduce the date. But since 22 is a master number because it's a dual number like 11, 22, and so forth, since it's a master number, in this case, you just leave it at 22. If it was 23, then you would add 2 and 3 together, that would be 5. But because it's, in this unique case, it's a master number, is 22, you just leave it there. So the month, October, number 10, 1 plus 0 is 1, that's the month. The date, 22, in this case, you leave it at 22. And number 3, the year, 1980, 1 plus 9, or, well, 1 plus 9 plus 8 is 18, which is still double digits and is not a master number, so we reduce it further. That's 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9. So you reduced the number 10 or October to number 1. Your day is the 22nd. You don't mess with that because it's a master number. And then the year, 1980, is reduced to 9. Now your birth date, October 22nd, 1980, has been reduced to numbers 1, 22, 9. Now that it's been reduced to numbers, then you add the numbers up. 1 plus 22 plus 9 is 32. Now you have a number, but you reduce that by adding them to a single digit number, and that's 3 plus 2 equals 5. The life path for this birth date is 5. So they would say if you were born on October 22nd, your birth date, your life path number is 5. Now, and then they'll go and give you what is, a meaning for 5. People with a 5 life path number are on a lifelong adventure. They're ready for anything and want to soak up every experience this world has to offer. They learn by living and don't allow themselves to get stuck in any situation that has outworn its interests. The moment things start to get humdrum, a person with life path 5 will, with this life path, will move on to something more fascinating. Now, they start giving all these little associations with that. Let's look at reality. When you have Black people who are promoting numerology, and they say, well, it's okay because all of this came from ancient Kemet, so therefore, this is our science and this is sacred science. It's been divorced, first of all, from the deities. Who are the deities? Let's go back. These 11 divinities, and we're going to show why it's 11. With their sacred numbers in the Akan language and so forth, they carry the energy of that divinity because it's a divinity. When they're talking about life path numbers, they're not talking about any one of these divinities, what their function in creation is, what kind of energy complex they have, and how it manifests within your spirit body and through your matriclan and patriclan nuanced energy. They don't talk about any of that because they can't communicate with any divinity. So they just try to reduce the birth date into a number, associate a general set of characteristics with a number, and then say, this is how you need to be operating. And if you make mistakes and so forth, this is how you get back on path with your life number. When we make mistakes, we align with the actual deity who possesses and communicates with us, give ritual offerings and so forth, engage in ritual practice, ritual chant, ritual prayer, ritual invocation, and realign our spirits with a force in nature that actually came into the world with us and guides us, that was assigned to us by the Supreme Being. They can't do that. They can't communicate with the deities, they can't be possessed by them, and therefore they try to move the deities out of existence and pretend like they don't exist. Now, and just to put a exclamation point on that reality, in our book, Kuku Tuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction, we show, for example, just so you can see the images, the deities Tahuti, Heru, and Set, under their titles Iprehui, Shek, and Smai-Ur. Tahuti operating through the moon, and Heru operating through the core of the earth and the core of the sun, and Set operating through the planet Mercury and so forth. Ibrahim, Ishak, and Ismail became Ibrahim, Ishak, and Ismail, Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael, and so forth. Totally corrupted functions in nature and tried to make them little white individuals in the Near East who never existed, and trying to blacken up Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael and say they lived in, Canaan and so forth. Totally fiction. It's a corruption of titles of deities functioning in creation that had nothing to do with little people walking around in Palestine. We did an entire course about how the Hebrews never existed. They're fictional characters. There was no group of ancient Hebrews, period, black or white. Tahuti, the deity of divine wisdom, also has the title Ma'al Sher. His assistant, the dog-headed baboon, is called Enan. He deals with divine wisdom. You see the dog-headed baboon offering him a divinatory instrument. And when you look at the title of Tahuti as Ma'al Sher, also called Ma'al Sheru, that's corrupted into Ma Sher, becomes Ma She, and later on Moshe and Enan, Tahuti, and the ape Enan becomes corrupted into Moshe and Enan, Moshe and Aran, Moshe and Aran, or Moses and Aran, or Moses and Aaron, and so forth. And the entire cosmology of the Book of the Cow of Heaven that talks about Tahuti going up on the mountain to talk to Ra, who takes the form of divine light, and Ra makes Tahuti his representative on earth. He makes him Ma'al Sher, and he gives him the assistant, the ape Enan, to lead the people to the Sekhet Hetep, the divine field of peace, the quote unquote promised land, and so forth. That entire cosmology from the Book of the Cow of Heaven, found in the tomb of Tutankhamen, is what they stole to manufacture the Moses story. There was no Moses, Moshe, nobody was walking around in Palestine, being led to the promised land and so forth. The Sekhet Hetep is the ancestral realm, and when you follow Tahuti, divine wisdom, and Enan, you're led to the ancestral realm, the divine fields of peace and offerings with divine food and so forth. We talk about Tahuti is called Yah because the moon on his head is Yah, or Yahu, which are later called Yahweh and so forth. That's another corruption. And of course, we put forth the detailed information about Shensu, Nefer Hetep Heru, the son of Amen and Mut. Shensu is corrupted into Shensu and Yesu and Yeshua and Jesus and Jesus, misnomer Jesus and so forth. They took this deity who's a lunar divinity, and they also combined him with Heru, the son of Asar and Aset, to manufacture the Jesus character who never existed, black or white. And of course, we also talk about, in our book, Kukutuntum, the deity of the Nile River, Muhapmet. Muhapmet is waters Mu of the northern Nile. Hapmet. Muhapraset is the waters of Mu of Hapraset, the southern Nile, and so forth. But the northern Nile divinity, Hapmet, the northern Nile, and Hapraset, the southern Nile. Munuhap is the waters Mu of Hap. Munuhapmet is the waters of the northern Nile that was corrupted into Muhammad, the fictional cartoon character Muhammad who never existed. So in our book, we go into detail about that to show how the whites in Alice Spring, when they invaded Kemet, they tried to transform forces in nature, that spirit forces that animate different aspects of creation, into little white characters in Arabia and the Near East, and tried to get us to follow these fictional cartoon characters. Now, but we got back to this, gave an example of a life path number and so forth. Let's look at how fraudulent that is. When people try to say, well, this is our culture, so, we can utilize this. This is our sacred science, is what people would say. Well, if it's our culture and you're taking the, the dates and so forth, we never use the new year or associate the new year with January 1st. That's the Gregorian calendar as well as the Julian calendar. These are calendars that are corruptions manufactured by Europeans. The first day of the year is not January 1st. The new year does not begin at the dead of winter in the dead of night. The day doesn't begin at midnight, it begins at sunrise. So that's idiotic in and of itself. And the new year does not begin at the coldest, darkest, most dead part of the year on January 1st. And that has nothing to do with the movement of Sapata, the so-called Sirius imposition. That still has nothing to do with the new year. So only Europeans say that the new year begins in January. That's pure fraud, pure stupidity. Only mentally enslaved and colonized Black people participate in a new year beginning in January. That's absurd. Now, if you say something is, this is our ancient sacred science, we're the ones who established the calendar thousands of years ago. Before Europeans existed on Earth, we already established the calendar. They imitated the calendar. 12 months of 30 days, that was taken directly from the ancient calendar, as you can see here, of ancient Kemet. The season of Aket, there were 3 seasons with 4 months each, 4 months of 30 days. These are the 4 seasons of Aket, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The 4 seasons of Peret, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the 4 seasons of Shemu, 1, 2, 3, and 4. 3 seasons, 4 months each, 30 days per season, 12 months of 30 days, that's 360 days, plus a 13th month that was an intercalary month of 5 days. That's the ancient Kemetic calendar, and that calendar is preserved today in the Coptic tradition in Kemet, the so-called Coptic Egyptian calendar. This is it right here. These are the names. Here's another version of it. Now, okay, so when you see this, they'll have the Bohairic Coptic dialect of the language, the Sahidic Coptic dialect of the language, transliteration. So you'll see it spelled in the Coptic characters and so forth. Taut in Coptic, the Arabic pronunciation there is Tut. In ancient Kemet, it's Tahut or Tahuti, the deity we just saw. That is the month of Tahuti. The first month of the year is the month governed by the deity Tahuti. And it's named after the deity Tahuti. And even in Coptic today, his name is, in the Greeks call him Thoth. In Coptic, it's Taut. And you'll see in Sahidic and Bohairic, it's Taut, as you can see here. When you translate that into the Gregorian calendar date, the first day of the new year of our ancient calendar is the Gregorian calendar date of September 11th. September 11th is called Tahuti, the first day of Tahuti, the first day of the first month of the new year, September 11th. So while Europeans would say that's the 11th day of the month of September, we would say it's the first day of the first month, and that month is called Tahuti. That's the first month of the year. The 12th month of the year, Mesore, as it's pronounced in Coptic, Mesori. In Arabic, now it's Misra. In the Ethiopian dialect, Nahase, Mesori comes from Mesut Ra, the birth of Ra and so forth. And that August 7th is the first day of the 12th month of the year. Not December 1st, but the 12th month of the actual year of our ancient calendar is what the Gregorian calendar date is, August 7th. But for us, that's the first day of the 12th month called Mesut Ra. Now, let's go up. In fact, let's go back to the quote unquote life path number. The example was if someone was born on October 22nd, 1980. October 22nd. So if you were born on October 22nd, 1980, you want to find your life path number, they would say, hey, your life path number is 5. Because October is the 10th month, 22nd day, 1980. What's October 22nd in the real calendar? The second month of the year is called Pa-N-Apet. The Cops now call it Paupi. It's the Opet festival and so forth. All right. October 11th is the first day. So that's the first day. And the same thing, these are 2 different versions of the same calendar. So you see the same thing here. Paupi, October 11th is the first day of the month. The first day of the month of Tahut, that's day 1, month 1 of the new year, September 11th. But for us, it's Tahuti 1. October 11th in the Gregorian calendar is Paupi 1, or the second month of the year 1. October 11th is the first day of the month. That means October 22nd is actually the 11th day of the second month of the year. So if you're born October 22nd, you're born on the second month of the year, that's number 2, and you're born on the 11th day. October 11th is the first day, then 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, all the way to October 22nd. That's the 11th day of the month. That's not the first day of the month. Well, I'm sorry, it's not the 22nd day of the month. Now let's go back. So instead of being October 22nd, the 10th, and the number is 10, and then 1 and 0 becomes 1. So that's the number 1 for your month. Well, October is actually the second month of the year. So that means the number is actually 2. Not 1, it's 2. It's the second month, so it's number 2. You have 22, they said leave that alone. Well, the 22nd of October is actually the 11th day of the second month. So now you have 2 and 11. And then you get to 1980. As we just showed, Cain Sud Nefer Hetep Heru was corrupted into Jesus, or Jesus and so forth. Jesus never existed. So that means 1980, nothing happened 2023 years ago. There was no Jesus. We're not in the year 2023 because that fictional cartoon character never existed. So if you're adding up, for example, people say, well, today, this year is 2023, 2023. 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7. This is a 7 year. Jesus never existed. This is not 2023. That's pure stupidity. So if you're talking about this science comes from ancient Kemet, why are you using 2023 when Jesus never existed and this is not 2023? In the real calendar, we're in 13,023. And you'll see us put that on all of our dates. We're in the midst of, the second half of our cycle and so forth. 13,023. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 3 is 9. So this is actually, quote unquote, a 9 year, if you wanted to use that terminology, not a 7 year, because Jesus never existed. So all these people utilizing 2023 are utilizing their birth, quote unquote, year, and utilizing that as part of a life path number, totally fraudulent. Let's go down a little bit. let's jump down real quick. This is Pet Sapatit. That means the coming forth Pet of Sapatit, the star system Sapatit, which is governed by Asaase. The Greeks call it Sothis of Sirius. So the heliacal rising of Sirius in a specific fashion happens every 1,461 years. They call that a Sothic cycle. And they were able to look in the text of Kamit when they saw the Greeks invading Kamit, and they talked about, a Sothic cycle happened, the coming forth of Sapatit, or the coming forth of Sirius happened in the year 139 CE and so forth. They were to calculate back and look in the text of Kamit 1,461 years before. They found an entry in the text showing Per Sapatit, the coming forth of Sapatit. Then 1,461 years before that, they were able to see in the text that Per Sapatit happened, and it was inscribed in the text. So you can see going all the way back, the earliest date in the Kameti calendar, which you'll see a number of different people utilize that terminology. They'll show that 4241, quote unquote, BCE is the earliest date. That was the earliest time you saw the coming forth of Sapatit. You saw this set of Medutu hieroglyphs right here in a text. The little feet coming out of the rectangular symbol is a house structure, a sanctuary. The ovular symbol is the open mouth, that's paired, and then the 2 feet walking, that means to come forth, to come out of. And then the triangular structure represents provision and so forth. That's the symbol for Sapatit, and you see the star and so forth. So it's the coming forth, paired, the coming out, or the manifestation of the star in the specific fashion, expression, and so forth, the coming forth of Sapatit. And they saw that in the text. It only happens once every 1,461 years. The earliest date in the text of Kamit where you see Sapatit came forth and there was a celebration of Per Sapatit, the coming forth of Sapatit. Some will say 4241 BCE. Some did a correction and said it was 4236 BCE. Either way, and many people utilize that date as, instead of using 2023, we use the earliest date for the establishment of the calendar in dynastic Kamit, 4241 BCE. And of course, that's 4241 BCE plus 2023. That means if the date was 4241 BCE, then the year right now is 6264. That's the year that we're in. If it was 4236 BCE, if it had been a few years after, which some will say 4236 plus 2023 is the year 6259. So you will see, if you see people online and people study ancient Kamit and so forth, most of them use 4241. So they will say we're in the year 6264. They'll say we're in the Kemetic calendar year of 6264. The calendar was established 6,264 years ago. 2023 or 2023 years ago plus 4241. The calendar was established 6264, or some would say 6259, but most use 6264. 8 plus 6 is 14, plus 4 is 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. That means it will be a 9-year this year if you use the ancient Kameti calendar. And for the smaller percentage who utilize 4236, it's still 6259. 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 9, and so forth. 22, and 2 plus 2 is 4, and so forth. And even if you left it at 22, it would still be a 22-year, but 4, and so forth. Either way, whether you use 4241 or 4236, neither one of them is a 7-year. So anybody running around saying if ancient Kamit is the origin of this numerological system that you're using now, this system of numerology, whether you're talking about Chaldean or Chinese or Japanese or Kabbalistical or tarot and so forth, whatever you're talking about, whatever pseudo-esoteric approach you're talking about, or Arabic or Sufism, whatever it is, if they're walking around saying 2023 is a 7-year and 7 represents this, and this, but they also say, you know, this comes from ancient Kemet, so we can utilize this quote unquote science. 4241 proves that it's not a 7-year. 4236 proves that it's not a 7-year. So all of their calculations are fraudulent. They're utilizing months that don't exist, fraudulent months, even the days. So if you said October 22nd is the 22nd day of October, actually October 22nd is the 11th day of the 2nd month. It's not the 22nd day of the 10th month, it's the 11th day of the 2nd month. So your calculations are 100% fraudulent, 100% off. Your day is off, your month is off, your year is off. Totally fraudulent. Now, and the next phase is, well, they're going to associate these values, and we're going to get into the values as far as what does 1 mean and what does 2 mean, and where do they get these values from? Why does 1 mean a certain thing? Why does 4 mean when they talk about structure and all this other stuff? Where did they get these values from? And why do you just soak that in and just assume that they know what they're talking about? And they say, well, 7 means this, and 4 means this. Where did that come from? Europeans, Greeks, Arabs, and others learned about certain aspects of functions of deities in Kemet, corrupted that information, and put forward misinformation about the nature and value of what's attributed to a number. And then we repeat the misinformation from invaders and put it forward as reality, which is not. But before we get to that, we're going to get into that in some detail in the coming weeks. But first, they're establishing, you also have this notion of every letter of the alphabet being assigned a specific number, and then the number is associated with certain values and so forth. Where did the alphabet come from? Some of them are using the Latin alphabet. Some of them are using the quote unquote Hebrew alphabet. Some of them are using, you know, Arabic and so forth. Where did that come from? The Arabs, so-called Hebrews, who actually never existed, the Greeks, the Hindus with Sanskrit, none of them created an alphabet. Or the Romans and so forth, these characters that we use now, the alphabet that we use now, is derived from ancient Khanit and Kemet. Now, some people know about that. In fact, let's go to a text. This is the actual, we're going to show the quote unquote evolution of the alphabet, but first let's go to a quick little rundown. Why do they think there are only 22 letters in the alphabet? Who said there were 22? And where did they get the numbers associated with these, you know, 1 through 10, and then they're doubling numbers 10 and 20 and 30 and 100 and 200 and all of that? Why are they doing that? Where did they get that from? So there are many articles, many, you know, detailed publications with regard to the nature of the Proto-Sinaitic script, but this is a specimen of the Proto-Sinaitic script. So first they discovered the Proto-Sinaitic script. That was the first time they saw, they would say around 1904 or something, Petrie, you know, discovered the script when they were in Sinai, in a region where there's a sacred shrine to Het Heru. So you have Kemet, and then you have the Sinai Peninsula, and then you have Israel, Palestine, all of that. But the little Sinai Peninsula, there's a shrine, sacred sanctuary of Het Heru. And in that region, they saw not only, you know, the Medutu, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet and so forth, but they saw these characters, and they were like, wait a minute, this is an alphabetical script. It's not hundreds, of symbols of ancient Kemet. They look similar, but it's alphabetical. So they called it the Proto-Sinaitic script. It's also called the Proto-Canaanite script, and Canaanite or Canaan comes from Kanana, the people, the Khan people, the Nubian people who migrated from Libya, which was the Khan land, Kanu and so forth, and migrated in north into the Near East. They called the region Kanana, later Canaan and so forth. And some of them continued to migrate into what is now Iraq, but that's ancient Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and that was called Kang or Kangi, as we saw earlier. So Kanu, Libya, Kanana, Palestine, Kang or Kangi, Sumer, the same Khan people carrying their religion and culture. So they'll call it Proto-Sinaitic or Proto-Canaanite. Earliest Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions are mostly dated between the mid-19th and mid-16th century BCE. That's what they were saying for about 90 years. And they're like, okay, they found the alphabetical script and they tried to associate it with the quote unquote precursors to the fictional Hebrews and say they're the first people to create an alphabetical script. And they'll say that we were just using symbols and pictures and pictograms and so forth with the first alphabetical script with the people in Sinai. Those are the precursors to the quote unquote Jews, and the Jews created everything. The Hebrews created pure nonsense, but that's what they were trying to say. They were saying that for about 90 years. However, the discovery of the Wadi El Hol inscriptions near the Nile River indicates that the script originated in Egypt. The evolution of Proto-Sinaitic and the various Proto-Canaanite scripts during the Bronze Age is based on a rather scant epigraphic evidence and so forth. They talk about a little bit more of that, but it was 1905 when Petrie and his wife, archaeologists, discovered the script. They started publishing. They saw it was, an alphabetical script. This is an image of that. But then in 1999, this was found. So nearly 90 years later, for a while they were trying to say, well, we proved that the alphabetical script came from the Hebrews, who didn't exist at the time and they'd never existed, period. But they'll say the Proto-Hebrews or Paleo-Hebrews and so forth, or those who are the precursors who would become Hebrews, they founded the alphabet, always trying to attribute something to them. But then in Wadi El Hol, 90 years later, inscriptions were carved on the stone sides of an ancient high desert military and trade road linking Thebes or Ta'apet and Abydos or Abju in the heart of literate Egypt, meaning in the heart of the culture where we already have been writing for thousands of years and so forth. These Proto-Canaanite or Sinaitic, glyphs were found in Kemet, and they were earlier than the previous inscriptions. We've been saying this for over 20 years. We were saying this before 1999. We said this, in the early 90s. That's the so-called Canaanite script. And African-centered scholars have been saying this for years. The so-called Canaanite script or Sinaitic script came directly from ancient Kemet. And the European scholars tried to pretend like it had nothing to do with people from Kemet until 99, where they found the script. So they have been dated to somewhere between 1900 and 1800 BC. They are in a wadi in the Kenna bend of the Nile, among dozens of hieratic and hieroglyphic inscriptions. So the hieratic script is the cursive version of the ancient Medutu or hieroglyphic script of Kemet. You have the hieroglyphic inscription, the Meduten Toro, with all the pictures and everything else. And of course, they're very complicated and detailed script. Then you have a cursive version of that they call hieratic. And then later on, you had a more simplified version of it called Demotic in the later periods of the late dynasties of Kemet. But the hieratic script the cursive version of the pictorial script. It was, easier to write and so forth. It was cursive, it was simplified and so forth. That's the hieratic script. This alphabetical script was found in the midst of hieratic scripts and so forth. The inscriptions are graphically very similar to the Serabit inscriptions from the Sinai, but show a greater hieroglyphic influence. So what they show and what the scholars now have been forced to accept is that the Proto-Sinaitic script, the so-called Proto-Canaanite, and the reason they call it Proto-Sinaitic and Proto-Canaanite, because they didn't want to call it, a simplified version of the ancient Kemetic script, because then they would have to admit that we created the alphabet that everybody uses today. The ABC all the way through to Z and everything, those characters came directly from ancient Khanit and Kemet. They didn't want to have to, admit that. So for the past 100 years, they were pretending like that didn't happen until they were forced. And mainly because African-centered scholars started putting the information everywhere and they were exposed. So it was over. So they'll just show that it was derived from a simplified version of the hieratic script. Now let's look at it. And they'll show the evolution of it. A couple of these they are inaccurate. Second. Just want to center it for you so you can see it. All right. So what you'll see, of course, is the ox's head right here. In the Medutu, the hieroglyph from ancient Kemet, that ox's head is still shown as an ox's head in Proto-Sinaitic. It's Alep, meaning ox. Then it becomes Aleph in later quote-unquote Hebrew. Also from Aramaic and Nabatean and Arabic and so forth. It later becomes this triangular structure. Then it becomes, you see the two horns and the face, and it becomes simplified into this X-looking structure and so forth. And eventually it becomes that little quote unquote Hebrew Aleph. There's really Alep, which is Arep from ancient Kemet, meaning ox, becomes Alep and Aleph and Alif in Arabic and Aleph in Hebrew and all of that. But it's the head of the ox. And of course, in Greek, that's alpha, like alpha, beta, and so forth. That's Aleph and Bet in Hebrew, and Alif and Bet and, Bayit in Arabic and all of that, but that's alphabet in English and so forth. So then you have the Bet or Bayet, the house. That's the rectangular structure, bird's eye view of a sanctuary or enclosure with the opening is the gateway into the enclosure and so forth. That becomes this, the B and so forth. But you also have the leg, which is and foot, which is the letter B in the script of Kemet. And then they just go through the entire thing. Alep, Bet, Gamel, Dag, How, Heel, and so forth. All the different symbols from Kemet, a couple of them they have wrong because they were speculating, but all the symbols from Kemet that become simplified when our people were in the Sinai, our people migrating to Canaan, so-called Canaan, later known as Palestine and Israel. We carried the same script and so forth. We continue to write these things in a simplified fashion, like a version of the hieratic script. We continue to utilize that. When the Eurasians invade and they start calling it Aramaic, and they start calling it Hebrew, and they start calling it Nabatean, and they start calling it Arabic, and they start calling it Latin letters and so forth, and Libico, Berber, and so forth. It's actually, these are our characters. And we have the original symbols. All of them are here. And you can find these kinds of charts if you just type in Proto-Sinaitic or Proto-Canaanite script and, hieroglyphs. You see all kinds of people who made charts showing the, evolution of the scripts. And it's not even an evolution, it's a transformation of the scripts, slight transformations, but you will see, for example, you'll see the side view of the head of the person this way with the hair and the beard. And then that becomes simplified into the neck and the little structure facing that way. And eventually it becomes the R, the R symbol and so forth. So that's one of the versions of R. So when you see each glyph and the name of the glyph and their titles in ancient Kemet and so forth, and how it ended up being the very simplified version of the letters you see in Arabic and Hebrew and Phoenician and Aramaic and Latin and so forth, you'll see it all comes directly from us. Now, so then when they start assigning numbers to these, but they're assigning them to the Latin alphabet, what does this glyph actually represent in the original culture? What divinity does it represent? What energy complex does it represent? Why is that ox head the symbol for the first letter? Why isn't the ox head the symbol for the 17th letter? Why did they make the ox head the symbol for the first letter? Why did they make the little house structure, the bayet symbol, or the pet symbol, the representative of the second letter? Why isn't that the 21st letter? Where did they get the idea that the ox was going to be first, Aleph, Alpha, the pet or bayet was going to be second, the gamul was going to be third, the dog, and really that's not the right one, it's really the open palm and so forth, the da symbol going to be fourth and so forth. Where did they get that from? They didn't get it from the script of ancient Kemet. So when they start rearranging these symbols, they don't know what association these symbols have with deities. Then they assign arbitrary numbers and try to say, well, you need to take your name and add it up. Then once again, just like the birth date, false day, false month, false year, therefore you have a false number. Even the number is false, and then the association with what the number means is also false. But then you have your, they'll say use your name. Take the letters of your name, reduce them to numbers. Who said those letters represent those numbers? And we're going to get into that in the coming weeks. What's even more ridiculous, Black people who are enslaved by our enemies, the whites and our offspring, are not wearing our actual names. So why are you using names like David and Jonathan and Michelle and McGillicuddy and other ridiculous names and then assigning numbers to them and saying this has something to do with your path? You weren't given these names that came from the divinities and carried a collection of sound vibrations that resonate with your spirit. Jonathan doesn't resonate with your spirit. It's not a set of sound vibrations that reverberate the unique construction of your spiritual anatomy, governed by the deity's energy that animates your spirit body. It has nothing to do with that. Michelle has nothing to do with that. William has nothing to do with it. Why are you adding up letters of a name that was forced on your family and trying to associate that with divinity in your life path? That is pure stupidity. That's enslaved and colonized and ridiculous thinking. It's pure fraudulent activity. Now, let's get into some details about who these deities are and these numbers and the cosmology associated with that. And once we lay that out, then over the next few weeks, we're going to get into each one of these 11 deities, what their functions in creation are. Let's just go out and go back in real quick. We're going to get into the nature and function of each one of these deities, their association with the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, their association with the 11 major body systems, the endocrine, reproductive, lymphatic, immune, renal, nervous, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, exocrine, and skeletal, how they govern natural cycles in creation, and our function in the world. What kind of spirit, Nkron and Krabi, or divine function, are we assigned? And the numbers associated with them. So, the proof that there are numbers, not just abstract values, but for those who can actually communicate with the deities, Black people, we know numbers are associated with actual forces in nature. The proof of that comes from, in Akan culture, it also comes from NKANESEM Kemet. First, let's go back to the Akradinbosom page, and we're going to prove it in 2 ways. And once again, if your number is not associated with a deity, if you can't show the deity that the number is connected to, then you don't know what the number means. And the number and its attributes that you read about is fraudulent. Now, we talk about the Abosom, are the spirits operating through the many suns, moons, stars, planetary bodies, oceans, rivers, mountains, wind, fire, black substance of space, all of creation, and so forth. Now, and we're going to get into how we are named after these divinities. So if someone's Kwesi, that's a soul name. That's Kwa Asi, a servant of the deity Asi. I'm born on Sunday, the deity that governs the sun, and Sunday on the masculine side is Awusi, which is Alsar. And then I would have the soul name Kwa Asi, or Kwasi, or Kwesi, and so forth. Now, we're going to get into all of that, but the Abosom, called the Akradinbosom, as a grouping of 11 deities, is a sacred number grouping found in ancient Akan culture, as we just show here, as well as contemporary Akan culture. The Mer, or pyramid texts, address the Post-Jat Ayat and the Post-Jat Nchaset, the great Ennead and the small or lesser Ennead, or grouping of the deities. So when you have the great Ennead, let's look at the great Ennead real quick, and then we're going to show the lesser Ennead. The term Ennead in Greek means 9. The Ennead, or Great Ennead, was a group of 9 deities in Egyptian mythology worshipped at Heliopolis, meaning the sacred city of Anu. It was a sacred grouping of 9 divinities. This is the symbol for deities, the axis, and then the 9 strokes. It's Atem. And in fact, let's just show the grouping of divinities. This is the quote-unquote Ennead of Anu, which they call Heliopolis, but Atem, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Alsar, Alset, Set, and Nebuchadnezzar. That group of deities, group of 9, called the Post-Jat Ayat, meaning the great 9 divinities. The Greeks said Ennead, but that's the term for 9. So that's a grouping. But then there's the lesser Ennead. So there are different groupings of divinities. Ennead, a great Ennead, a group of 9 divinities, as we just saw. And let's pull out. There's also the group of 8 divinities of Kemenu, the sacred city of the 8. Kemenu means 8. They call them the Agdawa. That's Amen, Amenet, Kan, Kayat, Hehu, and Hehu, Nun, and Nunet. That's the grouping of 8 divinities. That's one image of them. This is another image of them and so forth. Oh, hold on a second. These are their names spelled in the Medutu and so forth. So you have a grouping of 9 divinities. You have a grouping of 8. You have the 4 sons of Heru, which is grouping. You have the 42 divinities that govern the administrative divisions of the 42 sepatu or nomes of Kemet, states, so to speak, and so forth. There are different groupings of divinities. And those different groupings of deities, a sacred group of 8, a sacred group of 9, a sacred group of 4, a sacred group of 7, a sacred group of 42, a sacred group of 11, and so forth. Just like you have different groupings of organs in the body, you also, so the endocrine system with a certain number of glands, circulatory system with a certain number of organs, renal system with a certain number of organs. You have these different groupings of organs and organ systems. Within the organ systems, in the same fashion, you have sacred groupings of deities in Kemet, organs within the great divine body. Now, in Kemet, you have the great Ennead, Posjat Ayat, means the great Ennead, we just saw them. But then there's the Posjat Nchaset, the smaller or lesser Ennead is a group of divinities. And in the pyramid text, the mirror text of Unas, the Pera Unas, Pharaoh Unas, and so forth, in utterance 219, lines 178 and 181 to 192, there's an address to this smaller group, meaning smaller in function. You have, just like you have major vital organs, like if you lost your appendix has a function, but if you lost your appendix, you're not gonna die. If you lost your brain, of course, that's a major organ, you're not gonna make it. If you lost your heart, you're not gonna make it. If you lost your lungs, you're not gonna make it. So you have major organs, vital organs, the greater organs, the greater grouping, the greater quote unquote Ennead. Then you have a lesser Ennead. They're organs and so forth, and they have functions, but some could be damaged and so forth, but you can still function. You just have to function in a different way or at a lesser capacity. In the same fashion, you have major divinities that govern the major aspects of creation, and then you have smaller divinities that govern the smaller, functions and so forth. The great Ennead or the Posjat Ayat, the smaller Ennead, the Posjat Nchaset, and this smaller Ennead can be found in the pyramid text, and there are 11 of them. It's a group of 11 deities. They are called the Posjat Nchaset. We go to pyramid text online. This is the pyramid of Unas, and they have the entire images. When you go inside the pyramid and take the pictures, they show you the west wall, the east wall, north wall, east wall, south wall, west wall, and so forth. And when you click on it, and they have the numbers of the utterances, so when you click on it, you have the actual primary text, and you can read the primary text. And you can go throughout the actual photos inside the pyramids. You can go to each inside the pyramid and so forth and get the actual primary text. So they have the actual text, but then they also have a translation. We said it was on wall 219, utterance 219 rather. Utterance 219, and it was parts 178 and so forth. And let's look at it. So the earliest religious compositions yet unearthed in the world are the Meru texts, the pyramid texts. When you get down to, it's talking about Heru, misnomer Horus, and so forth. This is your father here, Alsar, whom you preserved alive. They're talking about the resurrection of Alsar and so forth. He lives, this Unas lives, talking about the Pharaoh. Just like Alsar was resurrected, Unas transitions, they want to resurrect his spirit so he can be an honored ancestor as well. So just like Alsar became that honored spirit in the spirit realm. They want Unas to follow in the same, footsteps. So they invoked Heru. They had also invoked Tahuti. Then they say the great Ennead, the Postjat Ayat. This Alsar is here, whom you have preserved alive. He lives, he lives. This Unas lives. He is not dead. This Unas is not dead. He has not gone down. This Unas has not gone down. He has not been judged. This Unas has not been judged. He judges, this Unas judges. So Alsar hasn't fallen, Unas hasn't fallen. Alsar hasn't been judged inappropriately, Unas hasn't been judged inappropriately. Alsar becomes a judge of the, divine order. Unas becomes a judge as well. They invoke the great Ennead. Then they invoke the little Ennead, the smaller group of the deities. And they say the same thing. This Alsar is here, whom you have preserved alive. He lives, he lives. This Unas lives too. He is not dead. Unas is not dead. And they go through the same invocation. Nunet, this is your, also called Nut, this is your son Alsar, of whom you have said, he is born for your father. You have wiped his mouth. His mouth has been opened by his son Heru, who is beloved, and so forth. And then they invoke the 11 deities of the lesser or smaller Ennead. This is the English translation. He in Heliopolis would be Anu, but that's the first one. In your name of Anu, he in Heliopolis and all of that. In your name of he in Busiris, Per, Busar, and so forth. So Pa Alsar, Busiris, which is Pa Alsar, the house of Alsar, and so forth. So Pa Alsar, that's the name of that divinity. So he in Heliopolis is the name of divinity. The second one is he in Busiris, which is Pa Alsar. In the mansion of the scorpion, which is Het Serket, that's the name of the divinity. Het Serket, and so forth. Then he in the divine pavilion, he in the white chapel, he in Orion. And these are just, of course, the English translations. And they keep going, he in Orion, he in Buto, and so forth. He in the palace of the great oxen. So when they list all of the different deities, there are 11 in the great Ennead. There's a sacred grouping of 11 deities mentioned in the pyramid text. Now, since there's a sacred grouping of 11 mentioned in the pyramid text, we're going to end this, this portion with this same sacred group of 11 deities as found in Akan culture today. Every single Akan person on earth is named after one of these deities. When we're born into the world, we're born on a certain day. That means the divinity sent us into the world on their day to let the community know that this person was assigned to this divinity. If I'm born on Benada or Tuesday, the day Da of the deity Bena. If you're a male, you're called Kwa Bena, a servant Kwa of the Abosom, the god Bena, who's called Heru Bedat in ancient Kemetic, Heru Bedat. He's called Bena Nakan. Kwa Bena. If you're born on Benada Tuesday, and they'll say the baby is born on Benada. Oh, he's a Kwap Bena. He was born on Tuesday. What it really means is he's a child of the deity Bena. He's going to bring the deity Bena's energy into the world. The deity Bena was assigned to him pre-incarnation. So the reason why he was born on Benada or Bena's day is because he's a child of the deity Bena. He's a messenger of Bena. He's a Kwa Bena. The same thing with Kwa Me. So you hear somebody named Kwame. He's Kwa Me or Kwa Mena. Kwa Men, the deity Amen Men, born on a Saturday, or Men Menida. Like I said, I'm born on Sunday. Kwa Asi or Kwasi, the divinity Asi. If a woman is born on Wednesday, she's Akua, a child of the deity Akua, which is Nebuhet. If she's born on Monday, she's Ajoa, a child of the divinity Ajo, or Ajoa, which is Aset, operating through the moon. If she's born on Friday, she's a child of the divinity Afua or Afia or Afi. and the woman is called Afia or Afua or Efua and so forth. A child of divinity Afia, who governs the planet Afi, which is Venus. That is Het Heru. She's called Het Heru in Kamit. She's also called Fi in Kamit. She's called Afia in Akan, and she's called Che in Akan. That's Het Her in ancient Kamit. Same divinity, same names. So let's look at a text that proves that. We're not going to read the whole text tonight. We'll finish it up next week, but I just want you to see the proof of it. So in the NKANESEM, the so-called Anansi stories in Akan culture, these stories associated with the quote-unquote trickster or messenger divinity Anansi, these are actually cosmological stories. So the things that they're talking about, Anansi and all of his adventures and so forth, Anansi is the messenger, the trickster. He's the deity Set in Kemet. He's Legba and Vodun, and Eshu, Legba and Yoruba and so forth. He's Kweku Anansi or Awuku Anansi, Kokroko in the Akan tradition, the trickster, the messenger, and all of that. There are many different stories in this particular book. They lay out the stories in the English language and then also in the Akan language so you can see the dialect. Now, so they show the Akan dialectical version first and then the English translation. Se yoye a abosom ba riase, and that's means how the Abosom, the lesser gods, came into the world. The reason why they say lesser gods, you'll see lesser Ennead and great Ennead and so forth, but lesser gods, that's just the way that when people were writing about our culture back, 100 years ago or so forth, the great god is Inyame, the great goddess is Inyamewa. So then the lesser gods, they would just use the English term lesser gods for Abosom or Orisha or Vodou and so forth. In the Akan language, of course, that's Abosom. So how the Abosom, how the deities, the goddesses and gods came into the world. This is the story about how they came into the world. So they have this long story about there was a certain woman, she bore 11 children. Every day when she got food, the children ate it all. So they started talking about these, a number of different things. And we're going to get into it more detail next week. I just want you to see this particular part to prove this point, and then we'll, get into some real detail next week. So he's talking about these children, and there were 11 of them. The mother set off and went home. She said to her children, "You must go to the plantation beneath the silk cotton tree, the Onyina tree, which is a spirit, a sacred divinity that inhabits that tree and so forth. There are pumpkins there. Go and pick them and come back." The children set off. They went and reached the silk cotton tree. Number 11, the child, number 11, said to his brothers and sisters, number 1, stand still. Number 2, stand still. Number 3, stand still. Number 4, stand still. He gets all the way to number 10, stand still. And I myself, number 11, I will stand still. What happened was she sent the children to a trap. They were going to go under the tree, and the pumpkin was going to fall on them and kill all of them and so forth. But number 11, he realized the trap. And he said, all my brothers and sisters, hey, number 1, you stand still. Number 2, stand still. Number 3. And they avoided that trap. Then they were sent into the realm of Aria Ba, Oba, Owuo Ba, different titles, Owuo Ba and Owuo Berima, the male spirit of death, Owuo Berima, and the female spirit of death, Owuo Ba. They were sent into their realm. They tried to take them out. Number 11 assisted his 10 brothers and sisters to overcome that situation. There was a situation in the heavenly realm that they were taken to and so forth. A trap was set for them. And number 11 told each one of his brothers and sisters, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so forth, stand still and don't go for this. And they overcame trials on earth in the sky or the heavenly realm, and in the underworld. And at the end of the story, they said, well, okay, you all are going to become the Abosom, you're going to become the deities. Now, you see number 1 stand still, number 2 stand still, number 3, and so forth. The translation for that is what's important. The term to still yourself or become still is jina. So the English translation is sibling number 1, stand still. Duko is the word for 11. That is the title of the 11th born. Instead of saying, hey, number 11, come here. Or in English, you say, hey, my 11th born child, come over here. Instead of saying, hey, 11th born, come over here. In Akan, we would say, Duko, come over here. Now, Duko se, that means number 11. He said, Eko Jina, number 1, stand still. Enno Jina, number 2, stand still. Esa Jina, number 3, stand still. Enan Jina, Enum Jina, and that goes all the way through. So he's telling the firstborn child, hey, number 1, Eko, stand over here. Enno, number 2, you stand over here. Esa, she needs to stand over here. Enan, he needs to stand over here. Enum, she needs to stand here. Nsia, he needs to stand here, and so forth. So he's calling these different divinities, and then he says, myself, do call 11, you stand, I'm going to stand still myself. He's referring to the deities by their birth order names, birthplace names. There are 11 deities, 11 gods and goddesses that govern all natural cycles in creation. And their names are the names, just like there are 11 deities in the Lesser Ennead from the earliest religious texts in existence, the pyramid texts. The Akan people have 11 deities. These are their names: Awusi Ajwa, Abena Bena, Akua Awuku, Yao, Abba, Ya, Afi, and Amen Men. All of us are named after them. Every Akan person on earth is named after them. Kwesi, Kwame, Esi, or Kosuya, Ajwa, Kwajo, Abena, Kwabena, Kweku, or Kwaku, Akua, Yao, or Kwao, Ya, Abba, Kofi, Afua, Kwame, and Ama, or Ameminiwa. We're all named after these divinities because they're deities, but they all have the names Ekun, Enum, Esa, Enan, Enum, Nsia, Nson, Awotwe, Nkron, Edu, and Duko. So every deity associated with the solar, lunar, and planetary body, associated with one of the 11 major body systems, which we'll get into, this also has a birth number name, a birthplace name, a birth order name. This is real NKANESEM, real numbers associated with powers in creation, not just some silly pseudo misunderstanding of, oh, the universe is mathematics. That's silly. Of course, you can see patterns in nature. You can see the moon going from, waning or new moon to waxing, and then waning from full moon and back waning to a new moon. It's 29.5 days. Of course, you can derive numbers from seeing things happen and write those numbers out and calculate the seasons and so forth. What's behind the seasons? What's behind the moon? What's the force animating the moon? Can that force possess you? Can, through ritual invocation, you can communicate with that force? What are the forces animating the sun? Can you communicate with those divinities, be possessed by them, engage in divination, and see how their energy operates within your specific physical body, within your specific matriclan and patriclan, how that energy is nuanced as it manifests through your matriclan and patriclan spiritual anatomy that's different from that same energy or divinity operating in another Black ethnic group like the Yoruba or Igbo and so forth. Everybody deals with these deities. They have names for them in their own languages, but the way Awusi shows up in the body of an Akan person and operates is slightly different than he shows up as Obatala in the Yoruba tradition, because we have different matriclans and patriclans, and that gives nuance and contours to the expression of that same energy complex. Can you deal with that when you're talking about the numbers associated with deities? If not, the numerology you're practicing, it's nonsense. And when things go along with the attributes you've been told, you say, see, numerology is true. And when it goes totally against that, you manufacture a rationalization about why it really didn't happen and why it shouldn't have happened anyway, but numerology is still true. We need to get out of that nonsense. So, okay. So we had to go through all, that preliminary information first, but we're going to get into these deities in the next 5 weeks. Probably like 2 of them per week. And so until we get through all 11 of them, and more information about, some of this other misinformation about numerology. Every week we'll have some of these major aspects of what people talk about with regard to numerology and then give correct information. But, okay, so, but if you have any questions, of course, you can post them in the chat room. That's what we want to cover tonight, but of course, you have any questions, post them. You can go to the Akradinbosom page and download those books for free and articles for free, before next week, if you want to get, abreast of, some of the details we're going to get into. Okay. So we know that was a lot for the first class, but we just had to, lay out that foundation first, but we're going to get into some targeted, detailed information for each one of these divinities and more coming up. All right. One other thing before we, before we go, and of course, we will have this, for the people who registered, of course, we're going to have, we will save this. We'll give you access to it. You'll be able to go on Vimeo and watch, watch the recording and so forth, whenever you want to. It's unlimited, of course, and we'll do that every week. So any class that you miss, of course, you'll be able to, review it. We have an upcoming trip to Kamit, May 23rd through the 31st. We still have some spaces available if you would like to attend. We took a number of people on the trip last year. We have like 13 little short videos from the trip to show you the different cities. We go to 12 cities from northern Kamit all the way to southern Kamit and into Nubia, Nubit, Abosom, and so forth. So those are videos of different tombs and shrines and so forth that we visited. So you can see the information. And we also have payment plans. You'll see that information. Some people are utilizing, and we have a video about that right here. Some people are utilizing their tax refund that's coming up to fund a portion of the trip, and then the payment plan option or the pay later with PayPal, so you can finance the trip. Some people, if you qualify, you can finance the trip for, like a $75 a month for 24 months or whatever to cover the trip if you go through PayPal, pay later, or PayPal credit or whatever. But we also have monthly payment plans as well. So if you would like to attend, the Adikat page on the website, all the information is there. And, we will be going May 23rd through May 31st. All right. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. We normally will go between like 8 o'clock and 9:30. Sometimes we may push all the way to 10, but it's 10:01 now. So we're going to go ahead and end it here. If you have any questions, of course, you can send us an email via kwesiakan@gmail.com, or, like on Facebook, Instagram, you have our handles Kwesiakan or Odwirafo on both of those, and we can get those questions answered for you. So, I say we thank everybody for tuning in, and Yabeshiabio. We will meet again.